Hello, everybody. This is our third episode of our podcast, How Does It Feel? This time, we are welcoming our Member of Provincial Parliament, Jill Andrew. I'm not welcoming her as a politician per se. I'm welcoming her as really somebody who, I don't want to get too much into hyperbole, but somebody who impresses me as a person. And I'll tell you that story. Several years ago, like a long time ago, I was the music director for a place called Sheena's Place. And that is a place that offers support to people with eating disabilities. One of my colleagues left Sheena's and took on the executive director of the Brain Injury Society of Toronto, BISTI. And what she did was she had, and her name is Julie Nato, and she had an art show of people with brain injuries at Artscape. And I was invited and went. And in the ward where I live recently, a new face kept popping up. And it was, at that time, the newly elected Member of Provincial Parliament, Jill Andrew, and she was there. And I took it upon myself to introduce myself to you. And then we found out we were both going to the same next event. And so I offered to drive you.
You did.
And I unloaded on you in my car, and I told you that it's my car and I could say anything I want. And you were cool. I mean, you were really cool. So anyway, I began to look at you not as a politician who is working on my behalf, but as a person who has a calling to work on behalf of, I hate to be droll about this, but humanity. But I really feel that. And the more that I got to know you, the more I began to realize I'm right. You know what you do.
You are too kind, honey.
No, I'm not.
You're too kind.
No, I'm not. No, and I have all kinds of proof, like this wonderful handwritten
Oh my goodness.
Christmas card, as you can see, that I love so much that I framed it, of Jill and her wonderful partner. But before that, several years ago, Jill gave me a gift. And having been an associate of Sheena's Place for, almost 2 decades as a client and then as a staff member, this book means something to me. Body stories in and out and with and through fat. And one of the things that I wanted to do today was to talk to you not just about what fat means,
Right.
but also the power of language. Because at one time, fat was a no, exactly. So everybody, this is the amazing, and I don't care what you say, I am biased, I'm prejudiced, I say that proudly. Jill Andrew.
So first and foremost, how's it feel? It feels fabulous to be sitting with you here today, honey. I want you to know that the same experience of humanity that you said you had with me is the same experience I have had with you, especially in these last few years, as I have seen you step up and literally be a community leader through your art, through your poetry, through song, bringing folks together, when it was safe to, after we had been so socially isolated, in our community parks, to sing, to cry, to laugh, to try to get a sense of belonging, and rebuilding after we were on our own for so long. So I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you for yet again, through this podcast, using your platform to shine the light on folks who have something to say, folks you've met along your journey. And I think all of us are that much better for having met you, because it's not easy. This world is not easy, as you know. And it can be hard to build those healthy, long-lasting relationships. I just want to say thank you for what you've done to do that for so many of us here in St. Paul's. And I also know internationally as well, too. Like, you've been doing the work for decades, you know. So here I am in my 6th year as MPP. And interestingly enough, you know, the term politician or the title politician, I'm still trying on that blazer and trying to make it fit. You know, I feel more at ease, and I feel more in my skin, considering myself as a teacher or as an educator who is now, you know, teaching a new set of tools, you know, around civic engagement, around democracy, around what happens at Queen's Park. So I see myself as a community leader by title, but really more so as an educator who's in a new classroom now, trying to do good work, learning from my community members, and trying to teach them some things or two at the same time as well. Yeah.
Well, perhaps we could officially deem you a poetician. Because in this book, Body Stories, Jill has a poem about eating disorders. And like I said, I don't really want to get into all that kind of stuff. It's incredible. It's one of those invisible issues that people don't know how to deal with. Yes, we have brought a kind of spotlight on anorexia and all other kinds of things. But, you know, I have an eating disorder that is never fulfilled. And that's an invisible thing. And so it's also, as you say, as an educator, a learning experience. For me, the learning experience is that we can't really judge others by appearance alone.
Absolutely not. And I think, you know, Sheena's Place, which I also have a relationship with Sheena's Place. I walked into their doors in my early 20s, you know, when I wasn't diagnosed, but I knew something was wrong. And I'll never forget Zara Dahani, a South Asian lawyer, DJ Zara, she was also back then, who hosted a workshop, a series of classes on the impacts of racism and systemic oppression on our bodies, and how sometimes eating disorders presented as a response, you know, or even a coping mechanism for those social tides that go up and down that we have to sometimes weather, you know. But seeing another woman, a woman of color, a fat woman, I saw a reflection of myself, and I saw her as strong and beautiful and leading and caring about all of us in that workshop. And that was seminal to my becoming. To quote one of my favorite scholars, Dr. Carla Rice, I think she's out in Guelph, we are always becoming, you know, we are never a finished project. And that really does speak to our social and cultural and even, you know, the economic connections we have to our communities. They're always shifting. They're always changing. It demonstrates our intelligence. It demonstrates our endurance, and really speaks to that interconnectedness that we have, that we're always becoming. Like, we're always shifting. We're always changing. And it relies on relationships, whether good or bad. That shifting and becoming is influenced by the relationships we have. So for me to find someone at Sheena's Place that was a healthy relationship, that I could lean into, the other participants in the workshop, it helped me build a better relationship with myself and also with my body. You know, so when I go into the public now in this very public job, I'm not walking into any room 100% confident. That's hogwash. I'm not walking in 100%, fear free either. So I think a little bit of fear, a little bit of nervousness is important because it really kind of reminds you about how important, how high the stakes are. I just try to walk in as myself, as best I can. And some people get it, some people don't, some love it, some don't. And in politics, you learn very quickly, you can't please them all. You can't please them all. And that's a lesson through life. So this anthology, I want to give a shout out to Dr. May Friedman, such an inspiration and the driving force, because that anthology took a while to edit. And it was almost like I was becoming alongside it. And I had to be in better places about my own self and my own body and how I felt to be me in order to commit to the project and in order to see the project through. So it really means a great deal that it came to life and that I was able to include that piece of writing that really talked to a tough time, talked back to a tough time in my life. I'm very glad that it touched you, and I've gotten good feedback. I mean, it would be nothing without the contributors who are also in the book, and of course without May's wonderful support and allyship.
Well, I'm just glad you're in the world. And you were saying something about relationships. I believe that everything has a relationship. As a singer, we're taught about musical relationships, but it's deeper than that. It's wider than that. If a vocalist doesn't have a relationship with him or herself, then what are you offering? But relationships and connectivity, it's one thing. I think people, and I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity to just bring about in terms of relationships. And as you said a few minutes ago, you can't please everybody. However, as flawed human beings, I look at people as diamonds that are flawed. We screw up.
Yes.
And people are not that forgiving. Yeah. And that, I think, is the conversation that I believe really needs to happen. Like, if I'm going to screw up, that's one thing, please be nice to me. But if somebody else is going to screw up and I get really resentful, I don't want to be nice to you. But the thing is, it's incumbent on me. But then it gets all complicated because in this world, there are really destructive people out there. Having said what I just said a minute ago, I find it so difficult to look at people who are destructive with kindness.
Oh, I know. That is, to be very honest, that is something that I struggle with. And I still struggle with it, especially in the role I've been in. I was speaking to a group of seniors before I came on long-term care and health. And not to get too much into health and long-term care, but, when you sit in the seat I'm sitting in at the Ontario legislature and you see every day rules, laws, legislation that's been put forth by the government, that's stripped rights away from workers or, underpays healthcare professionals that are so needed right now, or don't provide paid sick days or, don't bring back rent control or, don't keep prices down on food and basic necessities or any list of things. It really can be hard to say, oh, well, I'm just going to look at them in a humane way, right? And they must have their humanity too. But somehow, some way, we kind of have to. Otherwise, I guess we should all just pack up our bags and, dig a hole and jump in and call it George. You know what I mean? So I have to assume that even those that we disagree with vehemently, that there still has to be some way at making a connection. And that's why, whenever I speak to community members who are enraged about whatever's coming out of Queen's Park on any given day, I always say, don't only just say you're angry, but communicate why and tell a story if you can. So at the very least, you have that cathartic exercise of saying, Premier knows who I am, especially in this international moment that we're in, where opinions are so polarized in some cases, and, we have lost sight on the goal of peace and of preserving human life.
Well, my new phrase is, humanity trumps politics, no offense.
It's sure. Let me tell you something, folks have said to me, so what's it really like being an MPP? And I think maybe one day I'll write a book and be really like raw on what it all is, what it's really like. But at the end of the day, you gotta ask yourself, there's different parties in the legislature. And if you equate us to like different baseball teams or different, basketball or football teams or whatever the case is. But in this case, there isn't a prize. You know what I mean? The prize, I guess, is fighting for human beings' lives to make them better. So you would think that with that high stake, that we could all sort of peel away our little, individual team desires and just focus on the problem. And when we see a solution that works, let's pass that legislation. Who cares if the NDP put it forward? If it's a good idea, pass it. If a liberal independent put it forward, pass it. But, when we have folks, sadly, who are, a little drunk on power, and, who loses? Everyday people.
Yes, that's right.
Everyday people. Because I assure you, there's 124 MPPs, and I assure you, I don't think not one of us, right now, while being elected, is visiting a food bank. I don't think not one of us, elected right now, can't pay our rent or our mortgage. But I can name you 20 people, right now, who have been at food banks, and are employed, by the way, or who are precariously housed or unhoused entirely and looking for their next warm night. But I gotta tell you, young people, whenever I'm feeling like, going under my bed and writing my resignation letter, I end up talking to a teenager, or I end up talking to, even a smaller kid than a teenager. Actually, you'd be surprised the things that the 9-year-olds are telling me. I often say, you should come to Queen's Park and talk to the government because they have some good ideas. That's what really inspires me. And frankly, our elders, our aging adults in our community, like yourself, who I know have seen.
I'm saging. You're saging.
But you know what I mean? Who have seen so much more than we have. And you're still able to smile. You're still able to do a podcast. You're still able to put on a shirt with beautiful colors and accessorize, and you've got fabulous frames. Not because the world doesn't have its fires, but because you still know the world is still worth it.
No, thank you for that. I really believe that my salvation, if I can use that word, will come from the community.
Yes.
But how I perceive the community. Because, when we have all kinds of people in like not a melting pot, but in a community, we don't get along. We come from different cultures, different languages, different experiences, different expectations, and it's rough. What I'm learning personally is if I'm going to screw up, depending on how badly I do it, the first thing I have to do is to say sorry, to own it. And that's a tough lesson.
And it's not sorry, but.
Exactly.
I've had to learn that one. It's not sorry, but nobody likes public persecution. So I think there's a part of us that always wants to kind of try to rationalize, oh, but let me just explain to you the context. There's always a but, but in this role, I've had to realize that sometimes you just have to say, I am sorry, and take a deep breath, swallow, keep your head up, your chin high, and keep it moving. And then when you say I'm sorry, it's on that person to accept it.
Yes.
It's on them to accept it.
And then you get
them
relieved.
Well, and they may not accept it, but
But that's not on you.
Exactly. It's on them to accept the apology. And it's on them to decide if they're going to release that energy and move on with their day, or if they're going to allow that incident or that concern to keep biting away at who they are. And this is not a forgive and forget story. This is saying sorry or forgiving and figuring out how to metabolize what you're feeling in a way that's positive. Because nothing is won when we just keep harping or when we can't listen to one another's opinions. Nothing is won when you can't do that. Nothing is won when you can't apologize, when you can't move on. But moving on looks different for everyone as well.
Yes.
And I've never been one to be like, this is how you move on successfully. Buy this self-care book for $19.99. That's neoliberalism at its finest,
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And just this wonderful conversation ending on a note of really, I call it reconciliation. It's a personal, humanistic reconciling that I think is going to lend itself to the hope for how we survive the future, how we get along, how we make friends, how we create, just how we exist and coexist. And essentially, that answers the question, how does it feel? It feels strong, and it feels good, and it feels like we want to do another episode. So I'm going to thank my wonderful guest,
Thank you.
who I consider a friend, our St. Paul's Member of Provincial Parliament, poet, teacher, Dr. Jill Andrew. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It feels good.